It's raining. Where has all the weather gone? I'm British, so when I've got nothing to talk about, and there's nothing really in the main news to talk about, so I'm going to talk about the weather. And there's a funny thing in Oxford. In the beginning of September, all the traffic comes back and all the students come back, and it kind of changes from this sort of harvest, sort of golden glow to sort of urban rain. It's amazing, really. It's actually quite interesting. So welcome to the Internet Seriously. I'm Lucien Taylor in rainy Oxford.
And I'm Emily Taylor, also in Oxford, but still holding on for the summer.
No, I'm Kieren McCarthy in London, and I think in a couple of weeks we'll have summer end of September.
Yeah,
that's
nice.
a good bet. So coming up, I've got to talk about it. After all the excitement last week, the band Oasis chose Ticketmaster to handle the sale of their stadium sellout We Love Each Other Again tour. And we ask, how well was the band and their fans served by the internet? Next, Twitter X have been banned in Brazil. Should we care? How do tens of millions of users in Brazil feel about that? And finally, Kieren and Emily gave me this title. They're the brains here, so I'm just going to read it out. Internet security continues to be shit and scary, and governments have had enough. Thank you. No, I'm sure we normally
there should have been some music.
We normally
there.
have some music over that. We're gonna.
There's a kind of scrambling
I
from
can
behind
hear
the desk.
some snuffling in the background. We'll
just carry
We're gonna
on.
have to
It's live.
sack some people behind the camera there. So first of all, I'm remembering. Please, before we get into the chat. Share, like, engage with comments and chats with us.
We're loving the comments.
Yes, we are. I'll tell you what, I'll say that again later. This really is live, and maybe those buttons and things that I get screamed at for not introducing will come up on the screen a bit later. We'll share them with you in a minute. So.
Oh, there they are. There they are.
They are. Here we are. Yeah, we're absolutely rolling in this episode. Katie, where are you? I know you're on holiday.
Katie's on holiday. Come back.
Producer's on holiday, so we're just going to bluff our way through. So I'm going to take the first topic today. Oasis, they weren't really, when we were listening to them, I remember it was all about bringing up the kids, listening to this blast of kind of, it was like
I
going
remember
back.
painting the bedroom of our soon-to-be newborn baby to listening to a combination of Wonderwall and Don't Look Back in Anger.
Yeah, it was magic.
Because they were in the charts at the time.
And the internet wasn't...
How did you get on with the tickets, Luce?
Well, I'm just trying to build up to it.
Oh, you're building up, okay.
So, but anyway, there's nothing really to build up to. I didn't get the tickets, of course. And of course, I'm bitter and blaming everyone and looking for causes. And what it's about is the internet, as far as I'm concerned. Because the band weren't really... The internet wasn't really around when the band were first set up, and they've come together. They've publicly declared that they now love each other and they're besties and best friends, and they're doing a multi-million-pound sellout tour to celebrate. And they use Ticketmaster to sell these tickets. And if I just read out some of the top stories. This is ridiculous rage, Oasis fans. This is in The Sun, as Ticketmaster puts people in a queue just to browse the website. Is Ticketmaster down? Oasis fans struggle to load the site. The Edinburgh News, massive queues for Ticketmaster, and both for Wembley and Dublin dates. And what I was particularly struck by was one of the people for the sort of ticketing agency consortium were actually saying they published a notice on the BBC. It wasn't maybe a notice, but they were saying how proud they were of the handling of this burst of tickets. And I'm thinking, Kieren, haven't they heard of the internet? You know, can you imagine if you had to join a queue to get your search results from Google?
Wasn't even a queue. It was a queue to get in the queue. I was in the queue to get in the queue.
I was in the queue. We were in the queue to get in the queue for like 14 hours.
Did you actually
get anything where you could buy something?
I got to the point where I kind of gave up, and then I went back and looked back at my computer, which was running in the background at about 1 p.m. It's opened at 9 a.m. I started about 8, and it said I'm 426,425th in the queue, and I thought, and I just closed the laptop and walked away.
Well, there were 4 stages.
You were strong.
One was the lobby, whatever that means. One was, I can't read what that says, waiting room. So you go to the lobby.
Isn't
and then
the
you
lobby
go to
a waiting room?
Well,
isn't it the same thing? It's just called a different thing,
well,
but it's just like a pen.
Please, you went to Cambridge. These people at Ticketmaster are really bright.
Okay.
So just,
Okay.
Lobby, then the waiting room, which is very different. Then the queue. Okay, and I got to the queue, and I've kept a screenshot for whatever it's worth on a podcast. I am 463,000th in the queue. Okay, so there was nearly 250,000 people ahead of me. My next screenshot, it's your turn. Okay, I then got into the stadium, Wembley Stadium, and I then tried to change date for a different date in the same stadium because it gave me a date picker. It threw me out.
Big
I
mistake.
tried things like
Back to the beginning, and then you're back in the lobby or waiting room.
But this is user blaming, stupid you for browsing the site. And that's what people are. I mean, I've engineered these things for 2 decades. I know what this is about. This is about session management. And I've even printed my session, my session token. It just shot for shit each time about 5 or 6 times until the whole thing was. Sorry,
I'm going to say I know this is difficult. I want you to breathe, and I'm going to say something that's going to enrage you even more. Michaeli Nailon, who is someone that the 3 of us know, who runs a very successful Irish registrar, he in the space where we were in the lobby in the waiting room with 400,000 people ahead of us, Michaeli gave up on trying to buy tickets in Ireland and got 4 tickets for Wembley.
Yeah, what we're moving into.
This is really, Michaeli, if you're listening, Michaeli, remember when we took you out in Oxford? We love you, man. And
we're coming.
We bought you dinner that time.
No, this is. I mean, in a week or 2, we've got an American rock singer called Sari Shaw coming on. And I'm really interested in this thing of I'm trying to keep this general and not be too bitter about not having my Oasis tickets. I'm trying to talk about the contamination of internet technology and what that does when you have these bad experiences, either with tickets or I had one once with a REM concert they took my water off me and then they made me queue. And it's all about, making fans queue is almost baked into the entertainment industry. But it kind of puts you off the band. And that's the thing I'm talking. We all use this internet, this great internet to mediate, to make things faster and easier. But when they go wrong, it's the bands, it's the artists that get blamed, and I'm interested in that. Yeah,
I think that's right. What do you think here? So, I mean, the sort of the gouging, the prices were going up as they got scarcer and scarcer, weren't they? And that was that's something that we're used to with air flights. We're used to not doing the same search from the same browser because the flight tickets will go up. So that's normal practice, but it just feels really, really wrong. And,
very interesting.
And I was just looking at the screenshot you had, and you've got Liam and Noel's face there. They're so associated with the whole thing because that's what's driving the demand. Kieren, what do you think about the whole sort of pricing thing and whether the experience with Ticketmaster puts you off Oasis?
I think it's a direct result of it basically being a monopoly these days. If there was a 5 or 6 companies selling these tickets, then I think you'd find there's a much better customer experience because they would be selling tickets faster. And if there was another 4 or 5 companies, like Ticketmaster, and they didn't sell tickets and didn't line people up, so they didn't get as much money, I think you'd find a whole better user experience almost immediately. So I think this is the issue here is it's a virtual monopoly, and they know they're going to sell the tickets, they're going to make a fortune, they're going to increase the price of tickets because they can and make more money. So that's the problem. I mean, in the US, they're actually looking at this behavior. They're actually passing sort of laws and regulations. I think the UK should do the same. I think we're suffering. And I do think it impacts And it really shouldn't. I mean, it's not as if Oasis have sat there coding or having long discussions with Ticketmaster.
Actually, with the user experience, I wouldn't be surprised if they had coded it, actually.
Well, that's the kind of Oasis feel to it, didn't it?
Yeah.
I think kind of attitude.
Yeah, it sort of just engendered a lot of anger. So I think that's the vibe
Kind of
they're going for.
anger.
Well, and I think I think this is quite sensitive, actually, because I'm not really an Oasis fan. For me, Oasis is the kind of people that appear at football stadiums as celebrities, and they appear in Hello magazines. I think the Oasis that I liked, the sort of scratchy, punky kids, has gone. And they are now about business, and they are now about money. And this experience of like ticket pricing amplification just reminded me that they're actually about money, and it did put me off. So I miss them from the past.
Don't look back in anger. Don't look back in anger.
Yeah, I heard you say. Yeah, I'm totally with you on that. Yeah, I know. I'm not bitter. We will watch this story unroll, and I'm sure everybody's going to forget all about the money.
We're all gonna magically be in Wembley Stadium together.
Next up, Twitter X.
Can I put a pitch in though for positive stuff, and that is that I watched the Mercury Music Prize last night on my phone, and there were some cracking bands, young bands that we should follow. Those are the gigs we should be queuing to get.
Yeah, totally with you. And I felt the same about watching Glastonbury as well. I've been watching a catch-up of Glastonbury, and I've been looking at stuff, and I'm like, this is brilliant. Why don't I know about this? Because I'm just stuck in the past playing old shit by bank managers. Okay, so Twitter X has been banned in Brazil. Should we care? But before that, it's time for our guilty pleasure online.
Kieren, what is your guilty pleasure online?
So I'm going to demonstrate this.
Oh, there he goes.
Kieren wanted to be asked this so that he could show us his effect.
Oh, very nice.
Kieren is just scrolling through a load of stuff.
Yeah, just scrolling through this.
For people who are actually listening to the podcast, we're getting a lovely magenta light in Kieren's home studio, and a green one and a red one.
This is paparazzi. This is my favourite party.
Party.
Yeah.
That nothing says party like purple going to red and then
fireworks.
And then green. Lovely.
Anyway, my guilty pleasure is the fact that you can buy this sort of stuff that was so high end and so complicated and so professional not many years ago, and you can just get it on the internet for a really good price. So my guilty pleasure is just sort of buying unnecessarily professional stuff because you can. And it pops up on when you look on Amazon, I need a light. And then it offers you this, and you go, oh, I'll have that. Guilty pleasure with that. I love it. It's ridiculous, but it's great.
I love
it
all the time. Well, the Gen Zs say you don't have to be guilty about that, and I admit I'm also a shopaholic, Kieren. So, so anyway, here we are. The Guardian have said that this is the first time a Western country has imposed such a ban. And the country of 200 million people is X's fourth biggest market. What do we think about this? I mean, this follows the sort of arrest of Pavel Durov last week.
He's the founder of Telegram, isn't he?
You're watching, this sort of fits with the next topic and the general one, and maybe we'll broaden this out to include that. The internet security continues to be shit and scary, and also the governments have had enough. Now, this isn't really about security so much, so we'll talk about that in a minute, but you're starting to see the governments getting frustrated, aren't you? The Brazilian government, they're picking a fight about the content. They're saying that Twitter X in Brazil is focusing on hard right messages and key messages. Again, just following on in The Guardian as well, I was struck by them saying that this is basically a battle for the truth. You know, our history is told by the winners and the losers. And in Musk's case, it's about who has control of the speech and whose speech is heard, and him controlling the narrative. And so you're almost feeling like it's becoming very political. It's becoming very almost like captured, like a Russian would capture a broadcast channel and sort of say, this is now for our propaganda. And there's this battle going on. Emily.
Well, I'm really intrigued by this sort of the transition of Twitter to X under Elon Musk, because it's really evolving from a let's call it a neutral platform, for microblogging, to a personal platform for somebody who clearly has ambitions in the political arena. And it's really interesting looking at the comments that we get on our feeds. Whenever we talk about Elon Musk, we get an awful lot of comments, and for a lot of people, he is speaking for the people who don't feel that they have a voice, and for others, he's this immensely polarizing figure. But I think, Kieren, it's a sort of continuum from the Pavel Durov story with Telegram and his arrest last week that we were talking about, is the role of these very prominent chief executives, and when they come into conflict with the authorities. Can you update us on what's happened with Telegram, Kieren?
Well, yeah, it's been quite interesting in that he's been released out on bail, and he started talking on Telegram briefly. I think it was yesterday, and so he's been quite what's the word? Compliant. He's been saying, well, I wasn't aware that it was as bad as it was, and I thought we were helping out, and there was never our intention. We've grown too fast. So he's been saying a lot of stuff. This tends to happen when you're arrested and you face jail.
Had 24 hours of prison food, and suddenly...
Yeah, as soon as you start staring being in prison, the reality of being in prison in the face, suddenly I find your mindset will shift. Yeah. So he's being very careful with what he's saying and sort of conciliatory. So that's kind of interesting, because up till now he's always been quite borderline obnoxious in the fact that he'll say, no, you can have whatever we want on here. We're not going to do anything.
Reflects the mood, the vibe from the internet industry, in my humble opinion. In 20 years of sitting in places like ICANN, there is this sense of like, no, it's not how it works. This is what we're going to do, and this is how we do it. And you're stupid, government. You're really stupid for not understanding how the internet works and the reality of it. And the government seems to be saying, we're just going to put you in jail.
Yeah. Oh, it was something. There was a really interesting comment thread on one of our videos talking about Telegram last week. And it was sort of saying, well, are they going to arrest Mark Zuckerberg? And somebody else said, well, actually, Mark Zuckerberg pays for a lot of people to do content moderation. And this brings us back to the Brazil example, is that Elon Musk, as one of his first sort of acts at Twitter, now X, is he fired most of the content moderators. And actually, although the platforms had for about 10 years kind of kept all of these content moderators on the down low because they wanted to pretend that they were just neutral platforms, they all have tens of thousands of people who are spending their whole working lives looking at the most revolting and vile materials. And there was just a contrasting story to this, also from Latin America, is AI reporters in Venezuela. So the persecution of journalists, the sort of what's happening in, of course, Venezuela, very troubled past, just had an election, contested results. They have not published the results of the elections. And the reports are that 13 journalists so far have been detained for covering the election. Wow. And thousands of people have been arrested. And there's connectus.org have developed two avatars called La Hama, I hope that's right, and El Pana, who are using generative AI to report on what's going on with the elections because it's too dangerous for individuals. And so, this also brings out the kind of the complexity of trying to regulate technology. You think, that's bad, ban it. And then you think, oh, actually, what about journalists in places where it's not safe to report. And this is an incredibly imaginative use of technology to get the story out there using relevant, verified information relating to the Venezuelan elections.
Right, and what you're talking about, and I do want to come back to Brazil because I think there's an elephant in the room that we haven't discussed really. You're talking about the AIs, the sort of tech industry's response to this. You know, it's dangerous to report, so let's get a machine to report. The government are having their activities and action. They're arresting people. They're banning social media platforms like Twitter X in Brazil. AP News has said that the blocking of social media platform X in Brazil is dividing users and politicians over the legitimacy of the ban. And many Brazilians, and let's come back to the people, the consumers, many Brazilians on Sunday had difficulty and doubts over navigating other social media in its absence. So, you know, and in Brazil, Twitter X is tens of millions of users. How would tens of millions of users feel in the UK if Keir Starmer's government banned TikTok or banned Twitter X? This is our fun. Kieren.
It's a dangerous balance, isn't it? I mean, so the truth is that if you do have a platform in which millions of people, sometimes tens of millions of people gathering their information, you do have responsibilities. What we're seeing, this is the way I see it, what we're seeing right now is there's a lot of these platforms are acting responsibly. And when governments say, actually, this is a major problem, they have mechanisms for dealing with it. And then you have some that are acting irresponsibly. And Elon Musk is acting irresponsibly. He got a court order saying, you need to stop these specific accounts that are spreading lies and are causing real problems in the real world, and he refused. And then they said, well, we'll arrest your executives if you don't. So he moved all the executives out the country. So then they said, we will block your service if you don't do this. So he said, block us. So it wasn't as it came out the blue. There was a process. And like similarly with Telegram, the truth of it is that they have just simply not been talking to law enforcement or ignoring law enforcement's requests. And these aren't millions of requests. These are things that people are genuinely worried about, really bad stuff that happens. And there being a platform like that does come responsibilities. If they refuse to do anything, this is what happens. Governments ultimately decide what happens in their country. And if they decide that they're going to arrest you to make a point, or they're going to shut you down to make a point, that's what they will do. And I think we'll find that Twitter will back down. And I think we'll find that Telegram will be more responsive. That's just it's the eternal battle between, authority and media barons.
And it's what you were saying, Luce. It's about the kind of the attitude of tech industry to any problem is like, can it be a 1 or a 0? And actually, most of life is not like that. If you're going to ban a technology, you're also going to hurt these civil society organisations who are standing up for journalists. Life is much more analogue. It's much more nuanced. And we have to sort of stop thinking about, if you want to do that, then it will break this technology in a way that makes you stupid. It's about sort of like, how do we all together try and solve these problems that are affecting our society?
I wish I felt like the panic was over, but I don't. I think what platform is next? Watch this space. So before we go on to our final topic today, we just wanted to look at a few or talk about comments that came in last week. But before we do that, it's time for our Tech Room 101.
It's you, isn't it, Lucien? Are you going to tell us your Tech Room 101?
It's Ticketmaster. Okay,
yeah,
moving on.
So, okay, yeah, that's fine. Okay, agreed.
Agreed and fully
What do you think,
supported.
Kieren? Are you going to stand up for Ticketmaster and argue against it?
No.
Okay.
There we go.
That was quick.
That was quick. So moving on. Do we have a voice that can talk to us about the comments from last week?
Hello.
Oh, Charlie.
We've given Charlie a live role. We're going to hear Charlie's voice giving us the comment.
That's because we're all too short-sighted to read the screen of comments. But thank you, Charlie.
I'll
Take
try
it away.
to do my best. Firstly, I'd like to apologise. I pressed the Room 101 button too hard. and
well, this is Big
it
Button.
started
This
and
is
stopped.
the revenge of Big Button, Charlie.
totally.
We've crossed them in some way, and they're making our lives a misery.
Yeah, first it was the intro, and then now it's the Room 101.
This is a mess.
Anyway, I was going to read out the Mark Zuckerberg comment,
But
and
I
then
just did that.
I got sideswiped.
Yeah, sorry about that, Charlie.
But I've got another one in response to the state-sponsored government involvement in cybersecurity. How much is too much? Clip, and it's James Morton 176 saying, "Lucky our intelligence services would never do this." Eye rolling emoji.
I don't know what to say. I'm a bit too scared to answer that. Emily.
Well, yeah, I think it's, one of the downsides of having a clandestine operation is, nobody knows what you do. And a lot of stuff that happens can't be spoken about. And so there's always a suspicion, like, if we're pointing the finger at others, are we doing the exact same thing?
So thank you for that. Emily Taylor there from Chatham House, editor of the Journal of Cyber Security, and
Cyber Policy.
Kieren McCarthy, journalist. Both of you together have given me the title "Internet Security Continues to Be Shit and Scary," and governments have had enough. Why do you say that?
I totally stand by that. I mean, Kieren, do you want to lead off first? You had a nice example from deep down in the stack.
Yeah, so the US government has put out, the Office of the National Cyber Director, that's relatively new. They put out a thing saying they're pushing for there to be much greater security on BGP using this RPKI signing technology. And what BGP is a fundamental protocol for the internet. Basically is a kind of an address book for network, so you know where the traffic goes. And for a long time...
sorry, can I interrupt? Do you remember there was a massive BGP outage? It was when Facebook, I think about a year ago, disappeared off the planet as an organization, and nothing worked. And it was the BGP tables configuration was misconfigured for a while, and the engineers, struggled to get it back up for hours because there was mutual dependency. Very, very interesting, but really, really key and fundamental to operating internet traffic.
It's an absolutely fundamental piece of how the internet works, and occasionally it goes wrong. You're right, though. Facebook disappeared. I mean, there's been multiple examples. Once there was what else disappeared? Amazon disappeared at one point. If people announce the wrong route, traffic can just go the wrong way for hours, and it takes time to get back. The more dangerous component is that people have been in recent years, increasingly using it for nefarious purposes. So the Chinese government is widely suspected to purposefully be moving traffic around in order to see what's going on with specific networks. In one case, $70 million worth of cryptocurrency was stolen by someone rerouting traffic through their system. So it's become increasingly a problem. And the internet industry has been looking at it for a few years now and has been pushing this technology, which works, called RPKI, which basically encrypts the information, so you can be sure that if someone is saying this route is real, it's actually real and not someone trying to hijack it. So that's great improvement of security. And the U.S. government this week said we're going to push federal networks to do the same, and we're going to push ISPs to do the same, i.e., increase security. And of course, the internet famously was designed, and it's been incredibly effective, but no one at the early days when they designed all these really thought about security. So every single component of the early internet has gradually had to increase its security as people figured out ways of using the sort of lack of security to make money or to cause mischief or to steal stuff. And this is a big push.
Emily, sorry to interrupt, Kieren, but Emily, that's an example of government in the US leading the way, saying government assets, government resources. We saw that a year or so ago with government banning TikTok on Westminster estate systems. Does that matter?
Well, I was just thinking about, RPKI. I can't even remember what the acronym stands for, and it doesn't really matter. It's a way, as Kieren described, of securing routing information. We at the DNS Research Federation have been tracking adoption of RPKI, and as Kieren says, it works. It's not deployed widely enough, and actually often procurement and government regulation is the first step in sort of saying, well, if you want to be a supplier to government, you have to deploy this, and that can move people, particularly deep down in the stack. It can be there can be a huge amount of inertia that stands in the way of change.
And so it's like security's a team sport. They say it's also a jigsaw puzzle, and it's like a three-dimensional jigsaw puzzle because there are actually layers as well. But the more we fix these little pieces, the more we reduce the threat landscape, and so we can focus our precious security resources on fewer and fewer things.
Yeah.
Emily, you had another example of some shit and scary being addressed by governments having enough.
Well, not quite being addressed, but just shit and scary at the moment. And that's, so Kieren's been right down in the stack, right down in the routing. This is right up on our roofs. Solar panels. So 9% of electricity generation in the Netherlands, for example, last year was produced by solar panels on people's roofs. And just as a sort of a comparator, that is equivalent to at least 25 medium-sized nuclear power plants. Right, and I'm looking at the blog of a friend of ours called Bert Hubert, who's an amazing, wonderful and hilarious cybersecurity expert for the government, for the Netherlands. And he's done a blog called The Gigantic and Unregulated Power Plants in the Cloud. He's saying, look, if you knocked out solar panels in Europe, you would take out the power grid. You'd take out half the power grid. If you think about the regulation that affects a single power station, it would be like a book. Whereas the regulation of the people who are installing your solar panels is equivalent, as he calls it, to an online birthday card company. That's the thing. And the weakest link is that we have a phone app that gives us, all sorts of pretty charts about what's happening with our solar panels. But that phone app is poorly secured, and white hat hackers have shown many times that you can get access to the whole network through the apps. You can install software, you can take things out. And maybe things will change with the NIS2 directive, which is coming into law at the moment.
NIS2, that's the European...
Network Information Security, the second go they've had, and maybe the Cyber Resilience Act will do it. But Bert Hubert is making the point that it's going to have to demand a lot of creativity in the interpretation, but actually this is just wrong, and for such a vulnerable, and electricity power grids, you have to have such a delicate balance. You can't store the electricity, and if you can get access to disrupt or install software across a whole grid of solar panels, that is bad.
And Kieren, this comes back to, reminds me of sort of Internet things security and how terrible that is with, Wi-Fi routers with, giving you access to your whole network in your house with default admin passwords and things like that. And there were strenuous efforts by the government to sort of deal with this in their sort of secure by design programs, which were gamed, I think, in that sort of ICANN industry way, and by the industries and the sort of bodies to try and dampen down this sort of default settings and secure by design sort of initiative. And it sounds like there's still rubbish out there, isn't there, at the hardware level that contaminates the internet level?
It's always a balance, isn't it? Because if you put a lot of regulations up front, then you're only going to end up with huge companies and less innovation. And then you usually have to wait until something terrible happens before people say, we need to do this. I mean, for so long we had, admin password, admin username, admin password on so many devices until that started creating havoc. And then they had to pass laws to say to manufacturers, you must use a different password on each piece of vital equipment. And I think that's where we'll end up with utilities and solar panel. I mean, this is critical infrastructure. And so there's just going to have to be additional security around it. But you're right, these apps, and I had it as well, not in my current house, in my old house. I had apps and I could turn off and on my solar panels, and I loved it. But we see these massive leaks, and we know the number of people that use the same password over and over again. And we know how good state-sponsored hackers are. So it is a potential huge problem that they could just turn off, just during a heat wave, for example, just turn off solar panels would create absolute havoc. So again, it's a balance. Governments have to occasionally step in when the industry doesn't do anything. And I think this article was really interesting on solar panels. They're going to have to do something. Hopefully the industry will realize this and step up so the government won't have to impose something. But where we are right now in multiple layers is the governments are saying enough's enough. You haven't done it. We're going to do it. And sometimes that's just what happens.
Thank you very much. We've got to the end of today's episode. That's all fascinating discussion. We've taken far too much time today. We've discussed, well, in my unprofessional way, I've just used my bitter and twisted disappointment of missing out on Oasis tickets to spout about how I didn't like them anyway.
Use
and
your
that
platform.
I really
think of Elon Musk, just use
I'm
the platform.
I'm going to use my platform, and I hate Ticketmaster, and I'm not sure if I even liked Oasis in the first place. We discussed Twitter X, which has been banned in Brazil, and I think we should care, and I think tens of millions of users in Brazil feel bad about that, and that's a really interesting topic. And finally, we've discussed the positive subject about how gaps are being plugged in internet security, one sort of jigsaw piece at a time, but it does continue to be shit and scary in other areas such as Internet of Things. Next week, we have our first guest, I believe, Sari Shaw. It might be next week, it might be the week after. We'll comment and check about that. We've certainly got a lot of activity and excitement anticipating our first guest, and the thinking is that we're all internet people, and we're bringing people from other industries to talk with us in not too much of a techie way, but about how the internet impacts their life and career. So we're importing a pop star, a rock musician from America, and we're going to talk about Oasis and whether she feels the same thing about Ticketmaster as well.
Kieren's got his party lights going.
Already having a party.
Having a party of one.
We're all very excited. Thank you very much. That was the Internet Seriously.